If each Myers-Briggs personality type designed a video game, this is how they would turn out if INTPs designed video games. It would be like playing in a world that was designed around perfect efficiency. It'd be like entering into a logical playground where all of the pieces fit together just so neatly. Like seriously, it'd be like stepping into the most intricate Lego set ever built. And yet, despite that, there would also be a sense of limitless creativity and freedom to explore this world however you wanted to. It'd be like being let loose in a sandbox where the only limit was your own imagination. But what exactly would make up this unique and exciting game world? Well, let's take a look at how an INTP's personality would translate into game design and discover what their game would look like. If INTPs designed video games, they would be known for creating worlds and mechanics that put players' problem-solving skills to the ultimate test. Since INTPs are all about efficiency and finding the simplest solution to complex problems, they would create games with intricate systems that were nevertheless easy to understand once figured out. The game's logic would be crystal clear. Once understood, players would appreciate the elegance and simplicity of the solutions INTP developers put in place. And let's not forget about the level of detail these types would put into their games. INTPs love diving deep into topics that interest them, and their passion for learning would shine through in their creations. Who knows what interesting tidbits and secrets they would discover? An INTP-designed game wouldn't just be a collection of random facts and figures. Everything would have a purpose and contribute to the overall gameplay experience. For instance, a single stone in a Minecraft-style building game could actually be used by the player for something important later in the game. No item would be placed randomly or without purpose. But here's the best part. While INTPs appreciate order and logic, they're not so rigid that they can't allow for creativity and exploration. In fact, they would understand that sometimes the best solutions aren't the ones they had in mind, but the ones their players come up with. INTPs would create games where players have the freedom to experiment and find their own way to success. It would be like giving players the tools to build their own fun, and then standing back to see what they come up with. So if you ever find yourself playing a game with a complex system that makes perfect sense once you figure it out, or when you find yourself exploring a rich, detailed world filled with secrets and interesting tidbits, you might just be experiencing the brilliance of an INTP-designed game. It's like when you finally understand that one complicated concept in a class. It's like, when you finally get the quadratic formula or the periodic table, and it all just clicks and makes perfect sense. That's what an INTP-designed game would feel like, but with the added bonus of unlimited replayability and the ability to blow things up real good. However, if you ask other types what their game would be like, they might answer in a completely different way. Let's compare the differences between INTPs and ESTJ, for example. ESTJs would create a game that emphasized rules and structure, maybe something like a strategy game where every decision mattered and every move had to be carefully planned out. They would want everything to be neat and organized, just like their preferred way of living. INTPs, on the other hand, would create a game that was more open-ended and allowed for creative problem-solving. They wouldn't be afraid to throw some curveballs at the player to see how they would react and adapt. And they would appreciate it when players came up with innovative solutions that they had uneven thought of. So basically, while both types enjoy strategy and problem-solving, ESTJs would prefer a game with clear-cut rules and a defined path to victory, whereas INTPs would prefer a game with more freedom and creativity. Now let's imagine that we gave an INTP full control over a large-scale war simulation game. They would create a game that was realistic and based on actual historical data and events. There would be no room for magic spells or spaceships here. Oh no, this INTP is all about sticking to what they know. Train troops and research technology, all while keeping track of a bunch of variables like morale and supply lines. It would be a challenge for sure, but an INTP would relish the opportunity to test their strategic skills against the AI and see how far they could go. Plus, they would probably learn a lot in the process too. After all, INTPs love to dive deep into topics that interest them, and war is a pretty fascinating subject. They would pore over books and articles about military history and strategy, analyze data, and draw conclusions. They would approach the game with the same kind of analytical thinking that they use in everyday life. No room for luck or chance here. Everything would be based on skill and strategy. In fact, an INTP might actually be able to predict the outcome of the war before it even starts. Of course, there would be challenges along the way, and the INTP would have to adapt their strategy based on the actions of their opponent. But ultimately, it would be a game of pure strategy and skill. Now that's what we call a true test of wit. And while the war simulation game would be super intense and strategic, it might not be everyone's cup of tea. But for an INTP, it would be the perfect game to lose themselves in. Just imagine the satisfaction of pulling off a brilliant strategy and winning the war, or the thrill of being on the brink of defeat but managing to turn the tables at the last moment. It's enough to make any INTP's brain cells do a victory dance. But it's not just about the strategy and the logistics. For an INTP, the game would also be a chance to learn and grow. It would pore over the data and analyze the results of each battle, figuring out what worked and what didn't. They would study the strengths and weaknesses of their opponent and adjust their strategy accordingly. It would be a chance for them to test their knowledge and skills against the best that the world has to offer. But if the INTP found a bug in the game, that would be a whole other story. If you've ever seen an INTP lose their cool, you know that it's not a pretty sight. They might start hyperventilating and pacing back and forth, trying to figure out where the error lies. You might hear them muttering to themselves as they try to logically puzzle out the issue, and don't even think about trying to distract them or interrupt their train of thought. They're on a mission to fix the bug, and nothing will stop them. Once they finally identify the problem, though, they'll swoop in to fix it with a few quick keystrokes. And from that point on, the game will run smoother than ever before. They might not be the most sociable types, but when it comes to fixing bugs, INTPs are superheroes in their own right. If INTPs designed video games, we would live in a world where creativity and logic would collide to create some truly special gaming experiences. Instead of relying on tried-and-true formulas, INTP developers would push the boundaries of what's possible, experimenting with new ideas and taking risks. They wouldn't be afraid to fail, knowing that failure was just another excuse to learn and improve. And the result would be games that were not only fun to play, but also push the limits of what we thought was possible in the gaming world. So if you love unique, innovative, and thought-provoking games, then you owe it to yourself to check out the games developed by INTPs. You might just be in for the surprise of your life.